So a lot of people are still talking about Matt Hardy and Private Party showing up last week on Impact Wrestling on Access TV. The open borders as Matt Hardy are well and truly in existence right now between Impact Wrestling and AEW. It seems at this point that anyone could appear on Impact Wrestling on Access TV from AEW, or anyone from Impact Wrestling could appear on AEW Dynamite on TNT. Now we're going to talk today about tag teams because of course Matt Hardy last week appeared with Private Party last week on Impact Wrestling on Access TV, and it's led a lot of people to discuss what other tag teams from AEW could we expect or possibly see in Impact Wrestling in the near future. So I've had a bit of a think, and I've had a think about some tag teams that possibly we could see appear inside of an Impact Wrestling ring or inside of the Impact Zone there in Skyway Studios in Nashville, Tennessee in the near future. So let's start off with some of the teams we could see in the future. Now the first one, of course, is Private Party. Private Party made their Impact Wrestling debut last week with Matt Hardy. It's also subsequently been announced today, last night, that Private Party and Matt Hardy are expected to, or are going to, rather, appear on Impact Wrestling on Access TV this coming week. So, obviously, for now, this was no real surprise, because obviously, with Matt Hardy and Private Party showing up last week on Impact on Access TV, we know how Impact shoots their television, so it was always very obvious that Private Party and Matt Hardy were going to be on Impact Wrestling television for the next at least 4, 5 or 6 weeks as Impact have taped their recent television. But what is interesting, of course, is that they just lead to this open border policy between Impact and AEW, something that a lot of people are excited about. Maybe the ratings didn't reflect it this past week, but hopefully it will do going forward. However, I think it does show a good statement of intent from Impact and AEW, because Private Party, for me, look, Private Party are an incredibly talented tag team. And I think they're not obviously at their peak yet. They're still incredibly young. They're still in their 20s at this point. They do have areas which they need to improve. I think there's no doubt that they are absolutely phenomenal inside the ring. They're excellent inside the ring. I think universally everyone would say the place that Private Party needs to improve is their promo ability, and I think that probably would be the case in, credit to them. For most pro wrestlers in 2021, we say it every generation, but each generation, the caliber of athlete, the things that pro wrestlers are able to do inside of the ring improves every single time, and it improves every single year, but the thing that's kind of lost because of that is the art of the promo. The art of charisma, that it factor, that intangible, something you just can't describe. And I think Private Party, that's where they need to improve. They need to improve on their promos. So that's why the pairing of having Matt Hardy with Private Party always to me made the most sense. Now originally, I'll be totally honest, I don't want to seem like such a hypocrite, and initially I didn't get it. I didn't get the pairing between them and Matt Hardy. I felt they were trying to do a parallel between Michael Hayes and the Hardy Boys in the early days of their career in the WWE. Of course, Michael Hayes was their manager for a period of time, and he was their mentor figure, and I felt like that's what AEW was going for, even to the point of Matt Hardy even dressing like Michael Hayes on the rare occasion. But now we've seen a shift, haven't we? We've seen Matt Hardy transition back into the Big Money Matt character. I think Matt Hardy's very clever. Matt Hardy knows when things aren't necessarily working, and he's very good at taking the pulse of what pro wrestling fans want and what is working or isn't working for his character. And I think he realized that, look, not to say that the Broken Universe is dead, not to say that the Broken Universe doesn't have a place in 2021, of course it does. I think what he realized, though, is the fact that, look, maybe I need to put it on a rest. Maybe this has been a thing we've been trying to push since 2016. It's now 2021. We need to move on. We need to evolve. And he's gone back to an old character. He's evolved by reverting back to an old character. But it's the Big Money Matt with a slight twist, because he's a manager now and he's scalping his talent's contracts. He got 50% for Private Party appearing on Impact last week, and he allows Private Party just to focus on the in-ring stuff while he can cut the promos. Matt Hardy's promo last week on Impact was sensational. It was excellent. Just having Matt Hardy back in Impact Wrestling is awesome. So Private Party, to me, appearing last week, obviously was a huge surprise. Loved Impact last week. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was a really good episode. Fantastic episode. I really don't think the ratings reflected how good Impact was last week. But I think this is an indication as to which tag teams we could see going forward in Impact Wrestling, but we could have some surprises too. So another tag team that obviously could appear in Impact Wrestling from AEW is the current AEW World Tag Team Champions and Executive Vice Presidents, of course, the Young Bucks, Matt and Nick Jackson. Of course, why would this happen? There are so many reasons why this could happen. There's obviously a lot of reasons why it couldn't, and I know some people might say, the Young Bucks, they're not going to appear in Impact. Well, that is true. There is certainly a possibility that they don't appear in Impact, but there are several reasons why it's possible. Obviously, the open borders policy right now between Impact and AEW is a thing. I think also what you have to look at is that the Young Bucks do have history in Impact Wrestling. They were Generation Me. And they had, I don't think they had the success that they wanted to in Impact Wrestling during their time with Generation Me. They were lower down on the totem pole at the time. This was the time of Hogan, Bischoff, Bruce Pritchard, etc. So Russo as well. So they didn't have all the success that they wanted, but they still had fantastic matches. Their matches against the Motor City Machine Gun, Full Metal Mayhem, their matches against Beer Money are stuff of legend. They were absolutely sensational in Impact Wrestling. Maybe they just didn't have the success that they wanted to, but they do look back on that period of time of, look, we had good matches. We weren't necessarily completely happy, and we weren't necessarily completely comfortable with the people that we were working higher up in terms of the officials in charge at that period of time. It was chaos in TNA, but they've been incredibly open about returning to Impact. They've teased it on social media. They've done interviews which they've said, look, we don't know what's going on when it comes to this AEW and Impact Wrestling relationship, but do we want to be part of it? Yeah, we do. We've already started fantasy booking in our heads. You know, the Motor City Machine Guns, whilst Alex Shelley might be on the shelf right now, they want to have that rematch with the Motor City Machine Guns. That can happen in Impact Wrestling. So that's also a reason why it's a possibility. Another reason, of course, is that Kenny Omega is the guy that really broke down the barriers to create this open border policy between Impact and AEW. And at the moment, as of right now, they are aligned with Kenny Omega. They're aligned with Kenny Omega, the Impact World Champion, Tag Team Champions, the Good Brothers. And obviously, as I mentioned, the AEW World Champion, Kenny Omega. The Biz Cliz has reunited. And given that Kenny Omega is appearing on both Impact and AEW right now, given the fact that the Good Brothers are appearing on Impact and AEW right now, the only part missing of that puzzle, of that jigsaw, is the Young Bucks. So it's absolutely a possibility that the Young Bucks could appear on Impact in the near future, and I don't know when. I've mentioned all the time when I talk about this Impact and AEW working relationship that it's the tip of the iceberg right now. We haven't seen everything we're going to see yet. I think this is only the beginning. We've been angling towards, I think, a Young Bucks versus Good Brothers match and feud. We're in the early days of that right now. It will happen eventually. It was teased when the Good Brothers took the Young Bucks spot on Dynamite a couple of weeks ago because of Don Callis. Eventually, we're going to have the Young Bucks versus the Good Brothers. And whenever that does happen, we're going to see that take place across both shows. I think we're going to see the Good Brothers attack the Young Bucks on Dynamite, and then we're also going to see the Young Bucks attack the Good Brothers on an episode of Impact Wrestling. Now, I think they're saving that to get the most reaction possible, to get the best reaction possible, and to get a lot of hype and surprise and shock on social media and whoever's watching the show. So I think we will get it eventually. I do think the Young Bucks will show up. Maybe not until the next set of TV tapings. I don't think they showed up at the most recent one, but it's certainly a possibility for the future. Now, another tag team that I think could appear from AEW to Impact is Top Flight. Top Flight's been a really interesting one, actually, recently. Now, obviously, they've been on a steady rise when it comes to AEW, rather. They obviously started off on AEW Dark, and I think they've won a lot of people over. Their appearances on Dynamite have been pretty impressive. They're another one like Private Party in the sense that they're very, very young. Very young. Again, early 20s. And I think that... Look, I think about Top Flight, and they had a match on Dynamite last week, didn't they? And it was certainly something that got memed and got retweeted and spoken about and criticized on social media because there was that spot, wasn't it, where they were doing like the flip. It didn't work, and then he went to do a moonsault and it kind of landed on his head, and JR was like, what was even that for? And a lot of people, rightfully so, criticized the spot. And it once again brought up the argument of when it comes to AEW of flips over style and flips over fists and the lack of psychology in certain matches and guys just trying to do high spots to pop the crowd and pop themselves and give themselves some affirmation that they're doing the right thing. They're looking for the "This is awesome" chant or the "Holy you know what" chant. You know, that's what they're looking for, and that certainly was a point when it comes to Top Flight. I think when it comes to Top Flight, what you can't what you can't argue about is these are an incredibly talented tag team. An incredibly talented tag team. In every match they've had in AEW so far, they've shown their talents. There's no doubt they're a talented tag team. Where I think Impact Wrestling comes into this is that when it comes to Private Party, like I mentioned earlier, Private Party I think are the perfect team to come over to Impact right now. Because they are young, because they probably do need a bit more developing. That's not to say that they're not ready for AEW, because they are. They've had fantastic matches in AEW, but going to an Impact Wrestling is the perfect opportunity for them to continue to develop. They do have weaknesses right now, and the only way that you improve on those weaknesses is by working over and over and over again. I used to say it back in the days of the territory, go to a different territory, learn a different hold, come back, and I think that's what they can use Impact Wrestling in terms of AEW. That's how they can use Impact Wrestling very effectively. Top Flight fits right into that for me. Top Flight, I look at them and say, look, there is really something there, something very, very special. Are they going to develop as quickly as AEW would like, just appearing on AEW Dark? I don't know. I struggle to watch AEW Dark sometimes because sometimes it can last like 2 hours. Sometimes it lasts 3 hours, and it's just, squash match, and then a competitive main event, and that's too much for me. I think going to an Impact Wrestling, even if it's on loan, do a TV taping here and there, maybe a couple of TV tapings. That way you're on, 6, 12 weeks worth of television. You only work a couple of dates, so you improve. You get yourself some exposure. You put yourself in a different environment, and by putting yourself in a different environment, you improve. You improve your ability in the ring. You improve your ability to cut a promo. You improve how you react with an audience, even though there isn't an audience there. But you go up against different opponents. You go up against different styles of working. You know how to work in different environments. You understand different styles of what different officials would expect of you. Because obviously what they would expect of you in AEW is different to what they would expect of you in Impact Wrestling. So not to say that AEW would use Impact Wrestling as a developmental system by any means. I look at it more as a WWE and ECW relationship in the 1990s. They're both separate entities, but if Impact Wrestling can help out AEW and AEW can help out Impact, there can be something there. And I think having a Top Flight go over to Impact, do a couple of shows there, do a couple of TV tapings, work a few storylines, work up against a couple of tag teams, I think that's mutually beneficial for both promotions there. So Top Flight are certainly a team that I think fits into that pattern. Another team is the Acclaimed. I'm a massive fan of the Acclaimed. I'm a really big fan of the Acclaimed. I know some people aren't completely sold on them. I know the criticism is, and even they mentioned it on Dynamite, or it might have been Dark a couple of weeks ago, that they're John Cena. They're a John Cena ripoff, right? Because they rap to the ring, right? And I get it. I get that criticism. But if it works, if it gets a reaction from the crowd, if people like it, then keep doing it. That's what I always say with stuff like that. If it can get a reaction, if people like it, if it pops the crowd, which it does, if it's entertaining, then keep doing it. I think this is a tag team with a ton of potential. Really a ton of potential. These are two guys that can be really, really successful with AEW, and I think they will be really successful in AEW. Where I think it comes into Impact, I think it comes in the same way that it comes into Private Party and Top Flight, in that, yes, they are slightly green, and whilst there are other things going on in AEW, you don't want them just to be on AEW Dark. You do want them to be doing something substantial. You do want them to be doing something of substance. And I think going to an Impact, I think going to another company, have them appear on top, have them compete for tag team titles, have them compete against some larger, more well-known tag teams, whether it's the Motor City Machine Guns, whether it's the Good Brothers, whether it's whoever, Violent by Design, have them get involved with some of those tag teams if they're not going to be doing anything in AEW. Part of the biggest problem when it comes to AEW, I've been a critic of it as well, is that AEW's roster is so big. It is so big and it is so stacked that sometimes you do worry about younger talent. Where are they going to fit in? They've got 2 hours on TNT every single week. They struggle to get everyone on the TV show. They struggle to get the females on the show, which is a massive criticism on my part. I mean, I think that's ridiculous. But they do have a very bloated roster and a short amount of time on TV, and sometimes that can lead to people like the Acclaimed going, look, you're not going to be on TV every week. Now, is that beneficial to you? You can look at it both ways. You can say, look, it keeps you fresh that you're not on TV every week, but also it stifles your development because you're not on TV every week. Going to an Impact, even if it's on loan from AEW, going to an Impact, doing a couple of TV tapings, getting involved in the program, that, again, it's mutually beneficial. From an Impact point of view, that gives them talent, it gives them young talent, it gives them fresh names to work in fresh feuds against fresh opponents. If you're AEW, you go, look, these are some younger guys, they do need to keep working, they need to improve, going to an Impact, it's mutually beneficial. They develop, they come back better. If it's Impact, it helps out the TV show. And I think the Acclaimed are incredibly talented. I think the Acclaimed would be fantastic competing in Impact Wrestling. So the Acclaimed are another name that I think is absolutely possible to appear in Impact Wrestling in the future. Now, another tag team is the Dark Order. This is where we start to get into more established names, because I think what has been fun about this AEW and Impact crossover is when we have seen the established name that we didn't expect to appear in Impact Wrestling, whether that is a Tony Khan. We didn't expect to see Tony Khan in Impact Wrestling, right? Whether that is a Kenny Omega. We didn't expect to see Kenny Omega. When did we ever think we would see the AEW World Champion Kenny Omega appear on an Impact Wrestling broadcast? We never thought that possible. So once you start to get into these more established names, you start to go, that could be something really exciting. The Dark Order, for me, you look at their journey. Their journey is absolutely, it's spectacular. It is spectacular, their journey, because they started off as this weird, it was just Stu Grayson and Evil Uno, and I don't think anyone got them. The gimmick I don't think worked. They had the creepers, the minions, whatever you wanted to call them, in the green mask, and I just don't think it worked. I don't think it worked. Brody Lee obviously was a massive, massive shot in the arm when it comes to the Dark Order. He completely reinvented them, legitimized them, took them to the next level, and they became the kind of cult sort of thing. Now, obviously, post Brody Lee, and during Brody Lee's time in being the Elite as well, they've become, not comedy, but they have sort of slightly comedic, because their stuff on being the Elite was just hilarious. I mean, it was spectacular. John Silver, the guy is an absolute superstar. Nothing is impossible when it comes to him. He is an absolute, I mean, words don't describe. He is absolutely insane. He is hilarious, and he's spectacular. He's going to be a world champion in AEW. There's no doubt in my mind. He just has, talk about charisma. John Silver has it. He's absolutely spectacular. And the Dark Order now, they've become fan favorites. They are, they were described as being a cult back in the start. They're a cult following now when it comes to fans. Fans love them. I love them. They're hilarious. Their segment this past week with Hangman Page was spectacular. So I don't know if this one's possible or not. All I know is that I'd love to see the Dark Order in Impact, because I'm such a big fan of all of them. All of them. I think that they are just hilarious, entertaining, and I think they're fantastic. I'd love to see him in Impact. Speaking of established names, Chris Jericho and MJF. Now, this is officially now the tag team of the Inner Circle, isn't it? This past week on AEW Dynamite, Jericho and MJF won the main event, whereby they're now the official tag team of the Inner Circle. Now, obviously, I think Jericho and MJF and Wardlow being involved in that faction, I think it's the beginning of the end for the Inner Circle. I think, obviously, it's the beginning of having to break up the Inner Circle, and I think there's no way that MJF stays with the Inner Circle for long. They might play it out for like 9 months or a year, but eventually they're going to split them up. Since MJF came in, the Inner Circle have had problems, right? That's the whole point of having MJF in there. But for right now, Chris Jericho and MJF are the official tag team. What better way to continue that storyline than having Jericho and MJF show up for Impact Wrestling, do a couple of TV tapings there, appear on some episodes, appear at a pay-per-view. Jericho's always, since he left WWE, teased joining Impact Wrestling. Jericho on several occasions was very close to joining Impact Wrestling. He's spoken about it. 2018, once he was doing the whole Jericho, Alpha versus Omega stuff with New Japan, obviously Don Callis was very instrumental in putting that all together. But at the time, in addition to being a commentator for New Japan, he still was, as he is right now, the Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President. And he stated on several occasions, Jericho was very close to coming to Impact. Jericho said it on several occasions. He was very close to going to Impact. He had discussions with Scott D'Amore, Don Callis, Ed Nordholm. He had lots of discussions. They offered him a lot of money. Jericho pretty much reinforced what I've been saying. The Impact are very well backed for the right person. Jericho was offered a lot of money. They were just about to figure out creative. Jericho obviously could have done whatever he wanted in Impact Wrestling. It would have been a massive, massive deal for Jericho to come into Impact Wrestling, but pretty much everything was agreed, and then Tony Khan forms AEW, then AEW becomes a thing, and then Jericho signs with AEW, and that's the case. And then everyone thought that Jericho would never appear anywhere else apart from AEW. Jericho said that he's going to retire in AEW. I think the interesting thing there is that the same story was the same about Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega was very close to appearing in Impact Wrestling before AEW was a thing. Again, Don Callis said, look, things were pretty much agreed. We were talking. It was going to happen. Then AEW happens. Kenny Omega signs with AEW. What's happening now, Kenny Omega is the AEW World Champion, but he's appearing in Impact Wrestling on the TV show most weeks. Chris Jericho can be exactly the same. He's best friends with Don Callis for years and years, the Winnipeg guys. Don Callis at this point is proving his worth to Impact, not just in terms of creative, but having built this relationship with AEW, got a Kenny Omega to appear on Impact Wrestling. Chris Jericho's the next name, and Jericho wants to do it. If Chris Jericho can do stuff that gets headlines, if Chris Jericho can do things that get people talking about him, he wants to do it. And there is no doubt in my mind he hasn't had a discussion with Don Callis going, right, when do I get involved then? When can I appear on Impact Wrestling? Because that's what people are talking about. That's what people are buzzing about. People are buzzing about the Kenny Omega Impact Wrestling stuff. People are buzzing about the AEW Impact Wrestling stuff. How do I get on this? And when I get in on this, I'm going to beat Kenny Omega's Access TV record. I'm going to beat Kenny Omega's Twitch record. I'm going to explode Impact Wrestling in terms of the rating and fan interest. Jericho wants to do that. He lives for that stuff. So I think Jericho and MJF, given that they're the tag team of the Inner Circle right now, given that it's the storyline of them teaming up right now, it makes logical sense that they would come over to Impact for a couple of appearances. Jericho's friends with, Don Callis. It makes sense. So I think that's a possibility. And finally, the other AEW tag team that could appear in Impact Wrestling, FTR. FTR is another one. After leaving WWE, I think most people expected them to go to AEW. Obviously, they did. But they also teased going to Impact Wrestling on several occasions. Now, their biggest match they wanted to have was against the North, Ethan Page and Josh Alexander. Of course, that isn't going to happen now because Ethan Page has subsequently left Impact Wrestling. His contract's expired. Josh Alexander, of course, is still with the company, so we could see FTR face Josh Alexander and someone else. I don't know if Josh Alexander wants to be in any other team apart from a team with Ethan Page. But FTR did tease going to Impact once they left WWE. They did an interview with Chris Jericho. We just talked about Chris Jericho, but they did an interview with Chris Jericho after leaving WWE. They did the traditional post-WWE Talk is Jericho episode, and they spoke about the desire of going to AEW, but also going to Impact Wrestling. Ultimately, FTR just want to face the best tag teams. I think when you look at their history and their reputation when it comes to pro wrestling, all they've ever wanted to do is have great matches. All they've ever wanted to do is face the best tag teams in the world. Are the best tag teams in the world right now in Impact Wrestling? I think losing the North hurts. Absolutely losing the North hurts because I think that's a match that FTR wanted to have. I think there's no doubt in my mind, though, FTR probably wants to face the Good Brothers, even though they face them quite a lot in WWE, but this version of the Good Brothers, the real Good Brothers. And I also think FTR really wants to face the Motor City Machine Guns. People underestimate how important having the Motor City Machine Guns is to Impact. You have people like the Young Bucks, you have people like FTR saying openly, I want to go to Impact because I want to work with the Motor City Machine Guns. So whilst the Motor City Machine Guns are still a thing in Impact, whilst they're under contract, I know Alex Shelley's injured right now, whilst this open border policy exists between AEW and Impact Wrestling, FTR versus the Motor City Machine Guns is absolutely a possibility for the future. And who knows, FTR, I'm not going to say that they're not doing anything right now, but they're not front and center right now, obviously. They were for a brief period, then they lost the AEW World Tag Team Championships to the Young Bucks. Now it kind of feels like, what are they doing right now? What are they doing? And again, not that FTR are rookies by any stretch of the imagination, but it goes the same when it comes to the Acclaimed or Top Flight or the Dark Order or whoever. If FTR aren't front and center and they're not in the most involved or they're not involved in the title picture when it comes to the AEW Tag Team division, why wouldn't they go over to Impact? Why wouldn't they go over and say, you know what? They speak to Tony Khan and say, look, we'll be on Dynamite every single week, but you know what? Let us work for Impact for 2-3 months. Let us get involved there because we'll be front and center on that TV program. That benefits us. That benefits AEW. And I think FTR, the fact that they love pro wrestling. They love the history of pro wrestling and they love to accomplish everything in pro wrestling. You can't tell me they don't want to be the tag team that won the NXT Tag Team Championships, the Raw Tag Team Championships, the SmackDown Tag Team Championships, the AEW World Tag Team Championships, and the Impact World Tag Team Championship. There is no doubt in my mind FTR haven't at least had a word with Tony Khan and say, look, while we're not doing loads of stuff over here, why don't we go to Impact? I think it's a possibility. And while we have this open border policy between AEW and Impact Wrestling, anything is a possibility right now, which is why this whole AEW and Impact Wrestling working relationship is so exciting. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on some of the AEW tag teams that could possibly appear in Impact Wrestling in the future due to this open border policy between both promotions? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about AEW, Impact Wrestling, WWE, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the comment section, in the community. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.